So we will listen now to the reading from the book Rays of the One Light. And the theme of this week is We are children of the light. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. It is common for people to perceive themselves according to their present realities. A person in ill health says, I am ill. Few say, I am well, it is my body that is suffering. People in a low income bracket say, I am poor. Only the unusual person will say, though outwardly I live in poverty, inwardly I am wealthy. Thus, when it comes to moral and spiritual development, people commonly identify themselves with their weaknesses and their mistakes. They consider it almost a sign of humility to say, I am a sinner. Though in effect what it means is that they identify themselves with their sinfulness, not with the soul's power to transcend all limitations in God. The great masters, including Jesus Christ, have always emphasized the divine potential of mankind. To encourage us, they address us as children of light, not of darkness. The Bible, in the Gospel of St. John, chapter 3, makes the point that our true home is not the mud of this earth, but the light of heaven. No man hath ascended up to heaven, it tells us, but him that came down from heaven. This passage continues, even so the Son of Man who is in heaven, emphasizing that Jesus, though he lived on earth, is perceived by the eye of wisdom as conscious, even in human form, of his true reality in heavenly spheres. The way to know God is to live in godly consciousness, and not to bewail our imperfection and our distance from God. Jesus said, Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. And the Bhagavad Gita states, Seekers of union with the Lord find him dwelling in their own hearts. But those who, lacking in wisdom, seek him with impure motives cannot perceive him, however much they struggle to do so. If you want to know God, Paramahansa Yogananda said, live in the thought that you have him already. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om.
Good morning, everyone. It's a joy to be with you all today. And before I begin, I'd like to read from Master's Book of Prayers and Poems, Whispers from Eternity. This is number 170. Teach me to drown in thy light and live. And it says it's inspired by a Hindu song. I come to thee with the song of my smiles. Whatever treasures have lain in the secrecy of my soul, I bring eagerly to thee. I bring thee all the honey from the hive of my heart. All that was ever mine is now thine alone. The sunlight of this world shining upon my eager hopes and brief, fickle fulfillments burned me repeatedly with dissatisfaction. Now I will quench my thirst forever in thy radiant waters. The taper of my aspiration toward happiness will burst aflame with thy coming into a conflagration of bliss. In thy vast, enchanting sea of light, I will swim joyfully forever. Teach me to drown in thee and live, rather than live in a mirage paradise of earthliness and die. Oh, amen. So, as always, one wants to preface the opening of the service with saying that this is a very, very important topic, that we are children of the light. How many of us, when we look at ourselves, first see our faults, our flaws, our failings, our weaknesses, and doing that, we more and more let them identify us. The reality is that, so you have those flaws and weaknesses, but you also are an immortal, eternal soul, which is one with God. In other words, it is a piece, a spark of God. That is as much a part of us as the ego is. That is as much a part of us as the ego is. The only difference is we identify with it, and we don't identify with the soul. And all great, true spiritual teachings are designed to get us to focus, to adjust our point of view so that we are looking at the light, God, the soul within us. So, yes, we have failings, but also, yes, a big yes, we are immortal souls. We are children of God, children of the light. When I said that we tend to look at ourselves and see the failings and the weaknesses that we have, we think of when you say to yourself right now, I am a child of God. I am a child of the light. Is there a tentative feeling? Is there a almost like that's not really true? Or can we say it with a great deal of power and conviction that I am a child of the light? I deserve God. I deserve God's presence in my life. We have to be as powerful with these statements as we possibly can be. Otherwise, I'm flawed. I have a problem with X. I have a problem with Y. We say with a lot of conviction, I'm a child of the light. I'm a child of God. My soul is perfect already. I have infinite joy and infinite love and infinite peace within me. How do we say those things? Is it with as much affirmation as we say the other? And if it's not, if you say that you do the one tentatively, change that around. Because Master said, our true reality, the reading said, our true reality, our true nature is God's nature. That is underneath our identification with the body, the mind, the personality, and the ego. We have to act, we have to live with the sense, as Master finished the, I think it was Swami finishing the affirmation, live now as if you have God already. Don't think that God is far away. God is, as Master said, nearer than your own thoughts, just behind the darkness, behind closed eyes. Imminent, in other words. If we with a great deal of energy and emphasis, focus on that, we can break through that darkness. We can break through the doubt, but we have to be convinced that we already have God. We just have to open that last door. I think it's a very beguiling sort of idea that there's just a thin veil between us and our true reality, the light. Master said that suffering, which we love to focus on, suffering helps us to not be too comfortable here in the material world, because it's not our true home. And to be reminded of that, we suffer, which helps us to seek within and seek in ways that are not worldly or material to find our way back to God. The suffering of the world is so we don't get too comfortable here, Master said. And to realize, because it's temporary. It isn't our reality, our true nature. It's a temporary part of existence, which is eternal. So this body and the karma that you're living in this life, I'm a single mom. I don't have a lot of money. I've lost my job. I'm very unhealthy. I have a problem with X, Y, Z. All of those things are us focusing in the wrong way. When we can say, today is International Happiness Day, just to tell you. And last night we did a satsang based on joy and happiness. And so I was focused on Master's book, How to Be Happy All the Time, to share in that satsang. And one of the things that he said is in the book is that when we focus on the suffering in life, it takes over. It becomes bigger. It's like anything. When we focus on it, our perception shifts so that it, whatever it is, looms larger, becomes bigger in our world, in our even vision. Whatever it is you focus on grows, which is a distortion of reality. So if you only ever look at where you have a problem, whether it's with people or money or health, whatever it is, everybody has them. Everybody suffers. And I'm not saying that to belittle that fact, just that it's not a unique situation. God sends us challenges so that we can realize that God is present even there, that we are still children of the light no matter what is happening. This is very difficult for the ego to accept. It can understand it intellectually, but it's hard to draw it in. Because when we're suffering, it's like saying, I'm a child of God, I'm a child of the light, and then you burn yourself or you twist your ankle, and all of a sudden you are very much the body, right? But the thing to remember is that once the challenge of what has happened, meaning the acute part passes, we again start looking for ways to change the suffering that we find ourselves experiencing. And that's the point. Even here, I can still think of God. Many people know, about 3 years ago, I dislocated and broke my left shoulder. And I remember when it first happened, because I had broken a bone once before, and I knew that something more had happened, more serious, because in the first break, if I just held my hand against my body still, it didn't hurt. But this, I could not find a position where I was not in extreme pain. So I remember friends coming and trying to soothe me. They were so sweet, so sweet. And that's God again, you know, bringing us support in the middle of a very traumatic event. And while one friend was stroking my back as I was just trying to find a place where I wasn't in pain, but I couldn't. And he said, we'll soon have you at the hospital. We'll find out what's going on. He was, you know, trying to placate me. And so the intense, the fall that happened, the finding people, all of that, the intense, acute phase of this was fading away. We were trying to now solve the situation. But I remember at the point where he was soothing me and talking to me very gently, I remember suddenly turning to him and saying, you know, there are people that have much worse things happen, and they don't have a friend like you. They don't have a hospital to go to or an ambulance to arrive to take them. They don't have somewhere to help. They are in their challenge and feel alone and bereft. This is very real in the world. So when we're on our way to the hospital, once the paramedics have come, I would like us all to pray for people all over the world in that situation. And that's the kind of thing I mean. Yes, we suffer, but there is a world beyond our reality. Again, regardless of what that reality is. And it's not to minimize people's suffering. It is to know that we are part of a human family where everyone suffers. And the only answer, the only thing to change that is to bring the light, to share the light, to channel the light to the world, to yourself, to your family, to your friends, to your country. And in this time of, you know, the COVID virus, even more so, we need to do this. We don't want to focus on the darkness. We want to focus on the light. In the teachings of Master, he very simply says, to get rid of the darkness, we have to turn on the light. And when we're in darkness, it's very easy to forget that. Turn on the light within yourself, which turns it on in the world around you. And so when I said that, the sun came out a little stronger. It was very sweet. Thank you, God. So the idea of the power of God's light to uplift and inspire. We cannot say strongly enough how much we need it and the world needs it. And lest we think that what we do in terms of prayer is not that big a deal, I want to share with you a story from a book called The Ministry of Angels. And this is a story of a woman that, I think she's English, but I'm not positive, who she was a nurse, she worked in a hospital, she saw angels around people. And regardless of what the diagnosis was for people, she would know if someone was going to live or die by the nature of the angels that were around the person. And there was always angels around people. Okay? So there was a man who was dying very angrily and hateful, not rejecting God, rejecting life, and very, very disturbed as he was dying. And this nurse said, there were no angels around this man when he died, because he had said, he didn't say, I don't want angels around me, but he rejected the reality. So right after he passed, the nurses came into the room to prepare his body to take it to the morgue. And a young nurse who was the nurse telling the story said was Catholic. She immediately went over into a corner and prayed for the man's soul right there in the room. She said immediately angels came. You see how important, if we could see this world of light that we are talking about in action, we would understand our part in working with it, if you will. That God, angels, the masters, don't act unless we invite them. Their presence is there, yes, but we have to ask for help. We have to ask for guidance. We have to ask them to uplift and support and inspire and heal the world, ourselves, etc. Our part is always a huge piece of this. And if we forget how important that is, there's no activity. In other words, the light, the presence of God is always happening. Always. Eternal, immortal. We are the piece that's turned somewhere else or distracted. We are the ones thinking, if I talk to God or the angels, they're not going to do anything. I'm worthless. Do you see? It's never true. You're always a child of the light. Always, regardless of what you've done, regardless of your faults or failings. And do we for a moment think that God is waiting for us to be perfect before we turn to him? No. I heard a friend do a sermon relatively recently, and she told this story of a little boy who was having a conversation. This is just a tale, so it's not truth, but there's a truth in it. And he was talking to Christ as a boy, Jesus as a boy. And he said, I don't have anything to give you. I wanted to bring you something, but I don't have anything to give you. So I don't know what to do. And Jesus said, well, give me the thing you did this morning. And he said, what did I do this morning? You mean when I lied to my friend? Yes, give me that. But just give it to me. I want that. And then he said, is that enough? Well, you can give me, and he listed all the things the little boy had done wrong in like the last week. And he finally said, see, if I take them, you can let them go and not think about them and try to do better. As he says repeatedly in the Gospels, go and sin no more. So there is never a moment when God says, nah, you can't come, you're too bad, you're too imperfect, you're too flawed. There's never a moment when that happens. Give me your failings. That's what Krishna says in the Gita. Do you see? Give me your pains, give me your labors. Christ says, I think it's Christ in the Bible, let me carry them for you. We just don't trust that that's real, but it is. We are God's children already, now, in this moment. And God is waiting for us to turn to him and ask for help. Be like trusting children with a loving, benign parent, and not even think that we are not worthy of God. When I told you the story of the nurse, the angels immediately, when a prayer was said for this man, were there. This man who had been, just before, screaming and yelling and angry and upset with God and the world. But there they were. There is no division between us and this world of light, except what we create. It's already here. We have to turn to it. We have to accept it as a part of our reality and our divine birthright. The part when I brought up Master's book, How to Be Happy All the Time, he talks about that everything that we do, all of our karma, all of our thoughts, words, actions, etc., everything that we do in a distorted way is to find our way back to God. We are seeking happiness. We want joy. We want the light. And that's why we do what we do. Even when we do awful things, when people do, things that don't seem as if that's what they're for. But in some misguided way, people think this is going to make me happier. This is going to bring that to me. But the truth is, it's never, as we know, outside of ourselves. It's always inside ourselves. Happiness is already there. Joy is already there. The light is already there. God is already there. And being his child, or her child, or its child, however you think of God, we not only deserve it, but it's ours anytime we want it, which is anytime we reach for it, anytime we focus on it. When we focus on the absence of light, let's say, when we focus on Maya, we will suffer. Why? Because what we get from Maya is temporary. I love when Master describes the world, the worldly situation seems to promise us everything. I will give you whatever you want, anytime. But in the end, it delivers nothing. The spiritual world, because we're asked to be, to renounce the ego, to live with self-control, etc. The spiritual world seems to want to take away from us the things that we like. Indulgence, self-indulgence, if I'm angry, deal with it. That kind of... So the spiritual world seems to want to take away from us, but in the end, it gives us everything. So with self-control, with renunciation, as Swami talked about in the reading, we begin more and more to develop the soul, and the ego begins to shrink in terms of its hold on our consciousness and our being. And that's the point of all true spiritual teaching, spiritual practices. The tools and techniques that the masters tell us will help us to draw closer to God and be able to live in the light, which, again, I want to remind you, is already here. We have to embrace it. We have to believe it. We have to have faith that we are beloved children of the light, and it is just waiting to enfold us in its presence. God bless you all.